All right, it says it's recording. Fingers crossed. Okay. All right, so I like to start with chapter 12 for a couple of reasons. One is that it is a very it's a topic that most of you either have a little bit of information about or have an interest about. Being athletes or being movement people, body composition plays a big role in our lives. And so I like to start off with something that kind of you can jump into and get your teeth into. Also, your physical activity logs, we have to set goals for those logs. Some of you may want to set a goal that is linked to body composition. So I like to do it straight up, and then we'll jump into chapters that are a little more abstract. Okay? So, and the way oh, this whole day has been a disaster. I should have just stayed in bed this morning. Okay, I guess really. This morning's class, I was trying to give them a review of the website for their textbook, and I pulled up your textbook, and then I couldn't find the things they needed to be able to do on the website because I was in the wrong textbook. Really? All right. The first slide, typically what I do, these learning objectives are at the front of your chapters. Double check against the ones that I put on the slide, because sometimes I take out some of the points that are in the chapter objectives, and that gives you a good heads up that you don't need to spend too much information and time on those particular concepts. All right, it doesn't happen for every chapter, but that way you don't waste time studying something we're not going to come across. Okay? All right, so something we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this semester is the difference between body composition and weight, all right? Because in everyday language and in the media, they always tell us about losing weight or putting on weight, right? And that isn't really accurate, right? Most people, when they say they want to lose weight, mean they want to lose fat mass, all right? Very rarely does someone want to lose muscle mass, okay? It does happen occasionally if you've got a really big strength athlete, like a shot putter or a big football linebacker or something like that. When they retire from competing, then they may want to drop some muscle mass so that, well, it's easier to buy clothes for a start, right? Because these really big guys often have to get their clothes made for them. So you will occasionally see people that when they say they want to lose weight are talking about muscle mass, but typically we're talking about fat mass, all right? When I get on a scale, the number that I'm given does not tell me how fat I am, right? And so this is a problem because people get hung up on the number on the scale, and it isn't telling them anything about how healthy they are, okay? So one of the easiest ways to look at body composition is just to divide the tissues into two groups. It's very crude, but it's the simplest version, right? So we have either fat tissue or non-fat tissue. Non-fat tissue includes muscle mass, bone tissue, skin, organs, everything else other than fat. To divide it more accurately than that, you need very sophisticated equipment, which typically the kinds of jobs that students on our program are going into, you're not going to have access to that level of equipment. So it's fat mass or it isn't fat mass is really probably what you're going to be dealing with over the course of your careers. Okay? And we are very often interested in the percentage of fat as a ratio of total body mass. Okay? Now, see? Yeah, really. Here we go. So this is a very obvious kind of example of this idea. But I think it's a good place to start to try to get your head around not using the word weight if we can get away from it. All right? So the chap on the left and the chap on the right both weigh 90 kilos. All right? So their total body mass is 90 kilos, the same. Underwater weighing is a way of identifying percentage fat mass that we'll look at in lab. And when they underwater weigh this gentleman, his fat mass is 23% of his total body mass. Okay? And this gentleman's fat mass is 12% of his total body mass. Okay? So his fat-free mass is about 79 kilos, and this chap's fat-free mass is about 67.5 kilos. Okay? So that's a very kind of obvious, simple example of the fact that standing on a scale and getting your total body mass does not tell you anything about that individual's strength, fat percentage. If we wanted to, we could say maybe their performance opportunities, right? So we've got to be very careful about trying to distinguish this, because that will set you apart from someone that is not educated, right? So when you're trying to get, depending on, you know, some of you, anyone want to be personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach, personal trainers, okay, coaches, couple, PE teachers, PT, okay, a lot of PT people this semester. Okay, so you can't just judge how healthy someone is from that scale. Okay? So one of the reasons we're so interested in this idea when we are movement people is that part of our remit when we go out into the workplace is to try to not just make people good athletes or good movers, but also try to help them with their long-term health and well-being, right? From a physical standpoint, we're not qualified to do the mental well-being, but we can help with the physical domain, okay? And it's really becoming more and more important that you guys get qualified and get out there, because we've got this basically epidemic situation with obesity going on in the States and in some other Western countries, let alone globally, all right? So obesity is now classified by the Center for Disease Control as an epidemic. I was playing around on the website over lunchtime, and it was quite interesting that they are trying to change the terminology here. So instead of saying that an adult is obese, what they are trying to introduce is that we say 7% of adults have obesity. So we're making it a statement that isn't so personal, maybe, right? We'll talk about BMIs. I'm not a big fan of BMI, and you'll see why. It's really only an indicator of whether someone is healthy or not. You can't use it as an absolute number. But overweight, BMI is, the number will be between 25 and 29.9, and to be classified as obese as an adult, it's different for children. BMI has to be 30 or above. Okay, so at least 300,000. This data's a little bit older. I updated this today. We're probably a little bit more than 300,000 people per year dying from diseases that are related to being obese or morbidly overweight, right? About 70% of adults in the States are overweight or obese. And the data for 2015-2016 was that as a population as a whole, adults had 39.8% obesity in the US, right? When you look at different populations, those numbers fluctuate. So Asian Americans have a much lower rate of obesity than African Americans or Hispanics, or even than white Caucasian adults. All right, Hispanics are at 47% of the adult population are obese. So given our locality, that's a real problem here, okay? And it's mostly still on the rise. You have to be a little bit careful. Some of the time the states will put out information that says, oh, now our overweight and obesity levels have flatlined. That means we're making progress. And when you dig into the data, actually what you find is that obesity levels have gone up and overweight levels have come down. And so that means they can say that their overall number hasn't changed, right? That's a little bit of a skew on the data, because obesity levels going up is a big problem, all right? And we'll talk a lot, I think, usually we talk a lot about the fact that there are a lot of people making a lot of money off of this problem, right? I'm fairly cynical when I look at advertising and stuff like that, but you've got to think about the fact that you probably know people, I know loads of people who either have been on a diet or are on a diet or are planning to go on a diet, right? And diets are in the media all the time. High protein diet, low carb diet, right? Keto diet, what else? There's loads of them, right? They're always popping up. And I want you to consider, if these diets worked, right? If they work, how come the obesity levels are getting worse? Right? So we'll talk on and off several times during the semester about advertising and diets, because that's not the way forward to be healthy. The way forward is going to be to control your calorie intake, to look at a well-balanced diet that's got all types of foods in it, all right, and to move, right? Moving's a key part of the picture, all right? So this was the data for Healthy People 2010, all right? And gradually the whole of America just got more and more obese. So by the time we got to 2010, the estimation was all these dark purple states are all over 35% adult obesity. Okay? Now, when we look at the Healthy People 2010 goals for that program, not a single state in America met the goals for that program. So then they initiated Healthy People 2020, which all of a sudden is here, and it seemed like so long ago when that first happened, and we're right there now, so we'll get some more data soon. But the way they reported obesity from 2011 changed. So this is 2018, and what they're doing now is they are self-reporting obesity. So instead of doctors or clinics reporting levels, people are self-reporting. So I'm not sure about how that might skew the data a little bit, but in 2018, Georgia got out of the really heavy group. All right, so we seem to have slightly fewer. Colorado's still the healthiest place to live on mainland America every year. Basically from 2000 onwards, Colorado was the healthiest place to live. All right, but Colorado has a very strong culture of outdoor activities, hiking and biking in the summer, and skiing and snowshoeing and things in the winter. Plus, it's a very wealthy state. Not all of it, but I mean, if you drive up to Denver, you go through some very poor little towns on the way. But as a state, it's pretty wealthy, and so wealthy people tend to not be as obese as low socioeconomic people. All right. So I put a link here for you. This link takes you to a page that allows you to look state by state. So if you can look at New Mexico, if you're from New Mexico, or you can go in and look at the state that you're from, and you can have a look at the statistics for adults, and for teenagers and for children. Okay? So again, the big problem with the obesity epidemic isn't purely that people are very fat, right? There's more to it than that, because that state of being leads to many different disease states. And it makes someone much more susceptible to developing these and not being able to manage them appropriately, and then having to have medication. Right? So we've got lots of different cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, poor lipid profiles, so their cholesterol levels are really bad. They may have sleep apnea, which means they don't sleep smoothly, and so they don't ever feel fully rested, and then that impacts their ability to do their jobs properly. Okay? It's much harder for pregnancies and surgeries. Managing pregnancy and surgery issues for obese people is pretty difficult. All right, so it's a big problem, not just the being overweight. It's very easy when we are movement people who choose to exercise every day, right, to make a judgment on people who are very, very overweight and say, oh, well, they're lazy, right? They eat too much. Why don't they just get off their big fat backside and go for a walk, right? You hear that kind of language all the time. There is an element of truth there. right? Because we will look at an energy balance situation where calories in and calories out need to complement each other, okay? But the more we learn about obesity, the more that researchers and people like the CDC and the American Heart Association are finding out that it is a way more complicated picture than just energy balance. That's the bottom line, that's the kind of starting point, but it can get much, much more complicated. Not for everybody, but for some individuals. And so you've got to try to catch yourself making those judgment calls about people, all right? So overeating, okay, is a cause of overweight and obesity. Doesn't have to be the only cause, and for some people it isn't a cause, okay? Genetics, we are finding out, is playing more of a role than we realized. And one of the things that they've discovered, leptin is a hormone that helps to stimulate the breakdown of fat tissue, okay? And what they found is that some individuals don't produce leptin at appropriate levels. So their body doesn't have that drive to break down stored fat, okay? That's not controllable. That isn't something I did as a person. That's my genetics, right? We also see alterations in appetite control. So some people do not indicate feeling full up, right? Satiety. I can't say that word. I can spell it, but I can't say it. So when you eat, about 15, 20 minutes later, your brain gets signals that you're full up, all right? So one of the reasons that I, at least, overeat at Thanksgiving or at Christmas is because you don't get the full up feeling straight away, and the food is so great and it's so yummy and you haven't had it, right? Food is so good at Christmas, Christmas pudding and mince pies and all those things that we can't get over here, and so you just like stuff because it's there on the table, and then about half an hour later you're sitting on the sofa going, oh my God, I can't move, right? And you get that really full up because it takes time for your brain to get that signal, okay? Some people never get that signal. So imagine if you never realized you were full up, right? Then it's very easy just to keep eating, okay? Physical inactivity kind of goes with ingesting too many calories, not using enough calories. Plays a huge role. But if you are 300 pounds overweight, right, how comfortable is it to move? Get pain, right? You walk a few steps, you're out of breath. You get really hot really quickly. So we get this negative spiral because once I'm 300 pounds overweight, what I need to do is increase my calorie output, but moving is really, really, really difficult now. So I don't move. And then I put on more weight, right? And it gets worse and worse. So when you go to Walmart this week, or Russell's, or wherever you do your shopping, take 5 minutes, right? Go over to the potato sacks, pick up the biggest sack of potato you can pick up without hurting yourself, and walk around the aisles for a couple of minutes carrying that. And then imagine that times 2 or 3 or 4. And think about how eager you would be to go and do your training session with that weight. Right? Because we have to get into the mindset, we have to start to understand why it's happening if we're going to impact it. Right? Then we've got cultural factors, right? Different cultures use food for different reasons, not just eating to survive, right? Food is used as a celebration, it's used to commemorate people, you know, it's used to tell everybody how much you love them, right? So there are lots of interacting factors that lead to the problem. Doo-doos. McDoo-doos. What can we say about McDoo-doos? They do now have calorie equivalents for all their foods up in the stores, okay? You have to go to their website to find the breakdown of fat versus protein versus carbs. They don't put that up in the store, right? If you go and you get a, what was I looking at this morning? If you go and you get a large breakfast, so it's like a pancake and something and some syrup and, right? That's 1,200 calories. 1,200 calories in one meal, right? If you get a large Big Mac meal, so you get a big drink and you get a large fries and you get either 2 hamburgers or that double size, right? That's like 1,600 to 1,700 calories. That's enough calories for a small white female who's an office worker for the entire day in one meal. Right? So they're not to blame for the obesity epidemic. I'm not trying to suggest that, although fast food has played a large role in the obesity epidemic, right? But just be aware of what they're selling, right? Not all salads are equal. Just because it says the word salad doesn't make it low calorie. Okay? So the next issue we have to consider is, where is this fat that I'm creating being stored in my body? We all have it. Even really lean people have a percentage of body fat, otherwise they'd be dead, right? So where we store our fat has also been shown to be linked to certain types of diseases, particularly cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes, right? So if we put our fat on around our stomach and our waist, okay, that is called central or visceral obesity, and it tends to make people apple-shaped, right? They'll have relatively normal-sized legs and arms, and all their weight carries here, right? Typically male, but not always male. My sister was classic apple her whole life, and surprise, surprise, she has type 2 diabetes. Right? If we lay our fat deposits around our thighs and our butt and our upper arms, that's called subcutaneous or peripheral obesity. And that makes us more pear-shaped. Typically female, but not always female. Right? So what they found in the research is that the way that visceral fat works, it gives off certain chemicals that depress fat use when you exercise, right? And depresses the breakdown of fat. So this visceral fat is considered more risky, it's a higher risk factor for cardiovascular disease than subcutaneous fat. Doesn't mean subcutaneous fat is okay, but disease risk is lower in this situation. Okay, so let's pull it back to a movement scenario, all right? In many sports, the higher the body fat percentage, the lower the physical performance is going to be, all right? So most sports want someone to be strong, but not carry extra weight that isn't beneficial to the performance. Because the problem with fat is it doesn't do anything except sit there, right? So all it is extra weight that you've got to carry around. It doesn't benefit you other than keeping you warm if you're doing winter sports, right? So for most athletes, they're looking to minimize fat mass within healthy levels and maximize fat-free mass, muscle mass, again, to a point that's going to be beneficial. Too much muscle mass can decrease performance in certain sports, right? If I have to run really, really fast, so if I put 15 pounds of muscle on you, that would slow you down, right? But if I put 15 pounds of muscle on a linebacker, makes him better at his job. So it depends on the performance as to what kind of body composition I want. But for most of us, particularly if you're in a sport where you have to get off the ground at any time, so there's air time within the skill set. So you're a jumper, a runner, right? Then fat mass makes you heavier, makes it harder, makes you have to work harder to get your body up off the ground against gravity. Okay. If I'm in a strength sport and I don't really have to leave the floor, then big increases in fat-free mass, in muscle mass, can be very beneficial. So it just depends. It's not one stroke for everybody, right? So it depends on who we're working with, depends on whether it's a female athlete versus a male athlete, depends on whether they're a sprinter or a shot put thrower. Okay? So if you've got your book, you can take a quick look. If not yet, on page 352 and 353, they have a couple of tables where they look at body composition measures on different fitness tests for football players and for soccer players. So you can see how their body composition impacts their result on a fitness assessment. And when we're coaching, one of the things we do, sometimes deliberately and sometimes subconsciously, is try to funnel the person with the best body type into a particular role, right? So if I am a basketball coach, I don't pick the person who's 5 foot to be my person that's going to throw the layup and win the game for us, right? What we want to try to do, though, is start to make those choices from an educated standpoint, right? With scientific research that supports the decisions we're making, okay? So this is, I think, a really interesting table, because oftentimes the goal is just to get as thin as possible, right? I was a not very good gymnast, and from the age of about 12, I got told I was fat every single night. I mean, we trained 5 nights a week. Every night I went to the gym from school, and they said, you're too fat, you're too fat, you're too fat, you're too fat, for years. You know, it kind of does your head in. So I'm a little bit loopy when it comes to nutrition and stuff. I'm a little extreme in some of the views I hold. But we've got to be careful that we change that, all right? You can't tell an athlete, you've got to lose 5 pounds, right? 5 pounds of what? Because I cannot drink and not eat any carbohydrate for 3 days and lose 7 pounds. Did I lose 7 pounds of anything useful? What did I lose? Not in that short a time, but water, right? So I didn't do what you needed me to do to improve my performance. I did what you told me to do, right? So we've got to start to be more technical in our language and how we approach this. It's easy for people outside sport to say, oh, well, you shouldn't tell your athletes to lose weight. Well, that's all very well, but I have 2 snapped Achilles, right? If I had listened to my coaches, or if they had helped me lose the weight they told me I was too fat for, I wouldn't have 2 snapped Achilles. But I was a fat, overweight gymnast, and I got hurt, right? So we've got a juggling act to do when we're coaching, or when we're in charge of people's movement development, okay? So, column number 1, this is minimum body fat percentage required in order to function, right? So, just to function. For men, it's somewhere between 3 to 5%. 3 is really low. All right? I would head for 5 as the lowest, personally, because I've known some people who were 3, and that's pretty low. Women, minimum 12 to 14%. So when you read an athlete, or you read a media story where someone says, a female says, oh, my body fat is 10%, either she's wrong, she's lying, or she's unhealthy, right? Because no woman who is healthy should be less than 12%. There are extreme cases, right? I suspect if you looked at the top 3 placements at the World Championship, 10,000 meters or marathon, they may be less than 12%. But they're freakish, they're not typical, right? You guys aren't typical of the population, none of you. I'm not typical of the population. By my age, I'm supposed to be overweight and lazy, and, right? We are not typical as a group. Okay. For lean athletes, 6 to 13 for men, 16 to 20 for women. Okay? For an individual who's healthy but isn't an athlete, so they may be physically active, but they're not training to compete. Right? 18 to 25 for men, 25 to 31 for women. Okay. So this indicates my brain problem. I'm at 26 now, and I'm determined to get down to 22. I probably wouldn't. I'll knock myself up trying to do it, but, right? I will follow the rules that I give you in class, and hopefully they'll work, and they probably won't because I'm older, but, right? Obesity, percentage body fat. So this is a better way to identify if someone is obese rather than BMI. So ideally, if the BMI indicated that, you would then get a real body fat percentage test done, okay? So over 25% for men and over 32% for women. Okay? You can sit on a ball if you need to. Any of you, if you want to, because those chairs are the most uncomfortable thing ever developed. Do help yourself to a ball. Alright, so I'm going to introduce this idea and then we'll stop and we'll pick it up on Friday. Okay? This idea of energy balance. Alright? A calorie is just the terminology for a measure of energy. Alright? It should have a capital C, but mostly you don't see it with a capital C. Certainly in the everyday media. Alright? So one of the things we have to learn is how many calories am I eating? How many calories am I taking in? And what am I doing on the other side of the equation to put calories out? Okay? So, medium-sized apple or fat-free banana muffin, which has more calories. Who says apple? Who says fat-free banana muffin? And some of you are sitting on the fence. Okay, all right, fat-free banana muffin. All right, the apple will be somewhere around 75 to 80 calories. The muffin could be at least 200, depending on the size of the muffin. All right, so that's something else to start to be aware of. Fat-free does not mean calorie-free. It doesn't even mean low calorie. It just means they put a load of crap into it to make it taste good because they took all the fat out. Right? And then you want to start thinking about, do I want to put that stuff into my body? I'd rather have the butter and have a smaller portion than have the margarine that is made with something I don't want to put in my body. Right? Okay, so we'll pick it up on Friday. Hopefully I've got the video right this time. I can get that downloading. And I'm going to have to get in touch with IT again about loading PowerPoint into Fabric. So, oh yes, we do have lab tomorrow. If you can, please get a lab book and bring it, because we will be doing a couple of those. If you can't, you'll just have to borrow off a friend and write it down and copy it in next week. Those of you that aren't coming to land, no, I'm making notes. Who is not coming to land?
Yeah.
I'm not coming to land.
You're gonna laugh. You hear it.
It's okay.
It sounds like incredibly unhealthy, but
It's alright.
it might start.
At least you got something.
Did you go your card?
Yeah, I think the doctor's on me.
Okay. So 4, just 4 of you. What about the other lady who was sitting behind you? No. Okay.
Yeah, I missed that. I feel like there was a couple but there was like, yeah, I was confused about the process.
Okay, well, I'll find them.
But then that discussion. On Monday?
So, when you go on to Blackboard, the syllabus schedule,
That's due the 27th.
unless we get a
There's
snow
another
day or something like that, is really pretty
Just
tight.
like
We very rarely change off of that.
Yes.
So tomorrow,
it's
it's looking at
That's just like a discussion.
permissions to move. So if you're PTs, that will be taken care of by someone coming to the clinic. But you shouldn't, it's looking at the idea that you shouldn't be running movement programs with someone without some kind of waiver, doctor's certificate, that kind of thing. And then the second lab, I believe, is heart rate. Okay, so they're easy to do on your own. You're just going to miss my spiel about what's important and why. And so we